Great. So welcome everyone to our monthly My Speaker Business community call. And it's great to have you all here. And we already realize that we're already kind of spanning the globe here again, having people from all over Europe and India and more to come. And as you know, every month we are getting together and we're gathering here just to really also introduce you to an incredible speaker friend of mine. And we'd like to really share with you, what are the best practices in the world of speaking, what do other people do, so that you can pick up very practical hints and tips to really make your own speaking business flourish further. And also that you get together, you connect with each other. As this is our community call, you can also share your projects and ask for help on any high priority projects that you might have right now. And today I have a very special friend here with me, and we are connected through, originally we get to know each other through the network of transformational leaders with people all over the world wanting to create change. And today our topic that we will talk about is called Congruent Speaking, how to be real and conscious on stage. Because often a lot of speakers that are out there, they think like they need to adapt. They need to adapt to how they dress, how they show up on stage, what they say, what they don't say. And they often enough adapt to a pretty formal style because they think that this is what the world needs to see, or that what their clients want to hire them for, or what the audience is expecting. But if you don't bring a little authentic, congruent you with you onto stage, and even before when you speak to event organizers, you don't stand out. So today we're going to talk about congruent speaking, and I have a very special friend with me here. Let me do a little bit of an introduction to who he is. He's a certified professional speaker, performance coach, and business consulting with over 20 years of experience in business and in people development and transforming performance. And originally, he was a corporate tax specialist with Deloitte. Now he's a sought-after international consultant and speaker who works with senior leaders and executive teams, helping to create engaging cultures, really transform performance, and achieve sustainable growth by unleashing passion, nurturing natural talent, and bringing vitality to the workplace. So he's really, he spends about 1,200 hours in front of rooms speaking, training, and facilitating every year. And, he is really working with big companies like, a lot of FTSE 500 and Fortune 500 companies, such as EE02, the Lloyds Banking Group, and many, many more. And, he really loves to be different. So, he's living his talk, and he really loves to challenge the status quo. He loves to inspire people and, also companies that he works with to really take on board a new ways of thinking and being and doing things, different way of, behavior and so on. So, and he's also a multi-award winning and best-selling book author. He published the book, The Ego's Code. You want to check that one out. And I know there's a new book coming out called The Congruent Self, which is again a perfect bridge into our conversation today. It's wonderful to have you with us today, Clayton. Clayton John Ainger. Welcome everyone with me, Clayton John Ainger. Clayton, it's wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Wow, what an introduction that is. I just wonder how many of us actually pause and reflect upon, how far we've come in our journey. And I want to begin just briefly with a couple of stories. So I used to be an accountant and tax consultant, specializing in mergers and acquisitions. And I passionately hate rules. And I think there are certain times when rules support us in life. But then I discovered, being immersed in the biggest rules-based legislation in the world, it was actually causing me a lot of pain. And so I left. And so this is going back about 20 years now. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Spent some time asking friends, family, colleagues, who they saw when they looked at me in terms of the nature of the work that I needed to do. Because when I wanted to change from accountancy and I went to a number of recruitment consultants, they would say to me, "Oh, you're an accountant." you trained as an accountant. Then you know, and I said, well, no, I'm so much more than that. And they said, well, you would always, in our eyes, be seen as an accountant. So we'll put you, you know, square peg, round hole sort of thing. So I decided to begin a journey and launched my own consultancy. And that in itself has been its own journey. And so that evolved over many years until it's, you know, it's a high six-figure consultancy. But I always wanted to do speaking. I always wanted to be immersed in mind, body, spirit. I always wanted to bring spirituality into corporate.
Even Elise had no problem.
Sorry, we should make sure that everyone is muted. It's not speaking. Clayton, keep going. I'll take care of it from my side.
So,
I know definitely the MNRI
it will be done soon.
So far.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So I always want to bring, whenever I look at a human being, I see more than just their physical presence. I have a gift of being able to see beyond the physical stuff into consciousness and also into congruency. But at the time, I didn't really know what congruency was. And in December 2017, I was in Canada and I was running an event. It was one of my spiritual weekends, and it was all about understanding the truth behind negativity. It was my 48-hour negativity detox. And over the course of this event, I have to really bring the full essence of who I am into the space to be able to take care of all the participants. And part of the journey begins with massive agitation, where I consciously and on purpose upset everybody, because we become addicted to our emotions, we become addicted to our own personality, we become addicted to who we think that we actually are. And so I needed to shake that up. And agitation is one of the most powerful communications from ourselves that we actually ignore, because we become conditioned to ignore it. And then that conditioning comes through over time. And so it was at the end of the event, it was an amazing event, and one of the participants came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you are one of the most congruent teachers and speakers I've ever come across." And my beautiful ego loved it. And then I took that step back and I said, am I truly congruent? And actually, what does congruency mean? You know, at a very, very basic level, was I showing up for those 48 hours as the same person on stage as I am off stage? And the simple answer was no, I wasn't. And so there was a journey began for myself to really understand what is congruency and what does it mean as a speaker, as a consultant, as a teacher, as a coach, whatever hat I am wearing, as a partner to my girlfriend, as a father to my daughter, what does that actually mean? And I literally went through every single area of my life and started to make some very conscious and courageous decisions. And fast forward to a very recent event. I was speaking for a client in front of a small group of people, about 30 people. But the 30 people were made up of major heads of major corporations, for example, Cisco Systems, VP, those kinds of big organizations. And I rocked up with, I've got brown hair at the moment, but I rocked up with blue hair and green hair. I rocked up with a very loud shirt on, and I walked into an environment as me. And I did it consciously because I wanted to agitate some of the room. I wanted to awaken some of the room because I knew who was in the room ahead of time. I knew where their thought processes were. So everything I was doing consciously. And this was a 3-day event all around complexity. It was a very dry subject. It was somebody else's content. And fast forward to the end of the 3 days, a number of participants came up to me. In fact, one in particular came up to me and said, I thought I was coming to learn about complexity, and this was the most transformational 3 days of my life. And then another very senior leader in an organization came up to me and said, please always be psychedelic. Because this was the essence of me showing up in my congruent self. It was a big risk. And it was quite interesting because leading up to the event, I had a conversation with my daughter, who's 16 in a few weeks' time. And I said to Isabel, I think I'm going to come up with an excuse not to do the event. And she said, why? And I said, well, because one, I don't know the content, it's somebody else's content, but two, I'm very nervous about showing up as who I am. And she said, perhaps that's the reason why you should show up. And she said, you also have not been stretched in a corporate environment like this for a very long time, because I would always show up suited and booted in the typical consultant type of way. And I showed up as me. I changed all the content, which I'll go through in terms of how can you deliver somebody else's content and still be congruent. And it was incredibly transformational 3 days for them, and it's incredibly transformational 3 days for me. And what's come off the back of that is a lot of work with each of those senior leaders who have all asked me to show up as me, as an example to their organizations, because they have realized that a lot of their people within their teams and their leadership are betraying themselves, are lying to themselves because they are pretending to be someone who they're not. And so now we're rolling out a series of programs in these big organizations to help them become more consciously congruent. And I'll give you my frame of what congruency means later. But there's 4 things I really love to share with you and talk to you about. First of all, other people's content. First and foremost, never deliver anybody else's content somebody else's way. And because that's not you, that's not who you are. And it's very important for you to take the step back and get permission from your client or whoever's content it is to rewrite it. And so I do a lot of deliveries for big corporate on behalf of big corporate with other people's content. And literally I have gone through it and smashed it up. The core essence of the message is still there. And that's the essence of the organization. The values and the content of the organization are also represented. But ultimately, how I deliver it will be delivered different from every single person who's on this call. You need to have your own stories around each piece. And you need to also really avoid what I call chalk and talk training, or chalk and talk speaking, where you talk at your audience. And if there's something within the content that you are unfamiliar with, then tell your audience. Tell them, this is, I'm going to now deliver this in a slightly different way because this is the way that I've been asked to deliver it. This is the core message that we need to get across. And there will be a gap, and we'll talk about the gap later between who you are naturally and who maybe you think you are as a speaker. But in essence, when you have somebody else's content, break it up. Find your stories, find your essence, find your thread. What is your magic that you need to bring into that content that you are delivering? Because ultimately, you will get caught out. And you'll find yourself on the back foot. And one of the fastest ways to overcome that is for you to get permission for who you are. Right up front. Right up front. And so I always get permission for talking about self-deception. I always get permission to talk about the fact that I'm a psychic medium. I always get permission to talk about animal spirits. I always get permission to talk about some of the tattoos that I have. And then I will weave that through whatever the content is. Because that's who I am, and they want the essence of who I am. And so for example, last week I was working with BT, British Telecom here in the UK. I do a lot of work with British Telecom. and I was talking about strategy and commercial acumen. And when you think about strategy and commercial acumen and working with senior leaders in organizations, how on earth can you start to talk about spirituality? So I talk about consciousness and being a conscious salesperson or a conscious leader. And every now and again, I'll ask quiz questions about favorite animals. And then so for example, one of the guys last week said, oh, my favorite animal is a koala bear. And I said, oh, that's really cool. Do you know the meaning of koala bear? And they would say, what do you mean? I said, well, the spiritual meaning of koala bear is to not underestimate yourself. So where in your process as a leader do you underestimate yourself? And then guess what? Other leaders start shouting out other animals. So I had elephants in the room. I said, oh, that's really curious. I said, do you know what the meaning of an elephant is? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, the elephant is all about honoring your intuition and listening to that inner voice and honoring that. How many times as a leader do you not do that? And they go, oh. So all of a sudden, because I have permission to be who I am, I can take my audience anywhere. And where this came from, many years ago when I was training as a certified speaker, the trainer was talking about an Australian tax specialist who was a speaker. I do not know his name. And what this speaker used to do, he used to come on stage and he would say, I am the most boring speaker that you will ever come across. But if I can save you 50,000 Australian dollars or 100,000 Australian dollars with my, do I have permission to be boring? By the show of hands, who said it's okay for me to be boring? And then everybody's hand went up. And this is very powerful for you as a speaker, especially when you start to embark on this journey of bringing more authenticity, more integrity, more coherence, more fidelity and truth into the speaking that you do. And I've consciously chosen those words because they are the 5 pillars that underpin what it means to be congruent anywhere within life. But I'll give you the detail behind those in a little bit. So first of all, just want to recap. For me, the most important thing around congruency is right up front, get permission to be who you are. Just get permission. Get permission to be your style. Get permission to laugh and have jokes or be mischievous. And I will often do this. I'll say to my audience right up front, I said, I'm quite playful, or I'm being very playful. Or I say to them, you know what, I'm studying a master's right now in credibility analysis and self-deception. So I will be watching all of you. So do I have permission to give you feedback if I see things that are incongruent with who you are? And everybody in the room puts their hand up. Do I have permission to play with you and poke you? Do I have permission to be mischievous? Because I like to play. And so if I'm playing, then they get to play as well. And then I get permission from them for them to be who they are. And for them, if they want to be mischievous and to be naughty and to play and to be serious or whatever that is. So effectively, what I'm doing with the room is I'm contracting with the room for my style and how they want to interact and play with each other and with me. And then the second thing is, if you are delivering other people's content, make sure way ahead of time that you have rewritten it, that you have your own stories. And interestingly, the story I was telling you about where I was asked to remain to be psychedelic, there was content that I was unfamiliar with. And there was somebody in the room who was more familiar with some of the content that was there than me, just because of his nature of his specialism. And I actually said, okay, and I cornered him on one of the breaks and I just said, hey, can I have a quick conversation? Is there something that you can help me with to make sure this message gets across? Because whenever we are speaking in front of a room, it is always, always, as you'll know, about your audience. The second you make it about you, that's when the ego steps in. That's when we go into high stress. We go into high beta brain waves in the brain. and I call it the ego's playground, then we have all sorts of distortions that are taking place, and that's when we get in our way. And so, always make it about your audience. And when you make it about your audience, it is going to be, it will be incredible for you, because you get to be who you are and they get to be who they are. The other thing I want to talk to you about is how you can identify when you are starting to get in your own way, and how you are starting to self-deceive yourself or betray yourself on stage. Now, 100% of the time, whenever I am speaking, whether it be in a classroom of 10 people or an audience of 500, I always feel nervous before I go on stage. And so I need to take care of me. But the first thing is if I don't have those nerves, I know that I am taking my audience for granted. That's what goes on within me. Other speakers who I have spoken to about this experience exactly the same thing. So I have what is called a pre-performance ritual, and I do my pre-performance ritual before I go on stage, before I do important calls, before I do sessions like this, just to get myself in the right state of mind. And I call it a win technique, W-I-N. And so the first of all, the W is I literally walk. And as I'm walking in the shape of a figure eight. And the reason I'm walking in the shape of a figure eight is because as I cross the center, as the eight crosses in the middle, I am actually accessing both sides of the brain simultaneously, and I want to wake up both sides of the brain. So I'm walking in the shape of a figure eight. And as I am walking in the shape of a figure eight, I am breathing. And I am just focusing on my breathing. I am doing a full conscious breath. And I noticed in the Hall of Fame that there is a great guy called Dr. Voice, who is in the Hall of Fame, and if you haven't heard Dr. Voice speak, I would listen to that. I was recently at a private session with Doc, and we were talking about breathing. And I made a slight change to my wind technique off the back of my conversation with Doc around breathing. And so now as I'm walking in the shape of this figure eight, I walk and my tongue is at the top of my mouth, and I'm just breathing in through my nose and then out through my mouth as I'm walking. And what that does, it enables me to access full consciousness. And so a little bit of funky foo-foo wah-wah. I always get permission from my audiences to do a little bit of funky foo-foo wah-wah when I'm stood on stage, but I'll share a little bit of funky foo-foo wah-wah with you. So there is a teacher, an Indian spiritual teacher called Yogananda. And Yogananda used to talk about the purpose of the spine is to move your life force. And as you breathe, you move your breath up through your spine, from your groin all the way through each of the energy centers in the body, which moves up the spine and out of the top of the head. And so that enables you to connect deeper with who you are. So as I'm walking in the figure eight, I'm breathing. And then it comes to the I. The I is my intention. Is my intention. And so when I am focusing, I am setting my intention. I am an international speaker. It is my intention to be a powerful leader in this room. It is my intention to connect with all the hearts and the minds and the souls of each person in the audience. It is my intention to be truthful to who I am. It is my intention to honor every single person. It's my intention, whatever that intention is. And it is also my intention to have fun and play. And then after I have finished my talk, my next step, which is the N, is I celebrate. And I honor myself and I honor the room. And so that's my brief win technique. And what that does is it enables me to come into my center as a speaker or as a trainer, or if I am, coaching somebody, or if I'm supporting organizations around interviewing high-profile jobs to make sure people are honoring and in line with their CVs and things like that. And then the final piece that I wanted to talk to you about before we sort of open up to questions is around the gap. When we begin a journey from being a consultant or a coach or a mentor to the stage as a speaker or to the training room as a trainer, doesn't matter, whatever that audience is, what happens is that we form this gap between who we actually are and who we think we need to be on stage. And they need to be effectively the same. So when you are congruent and you're on stage and you are honest and true to who you are, there is no gap. And you are able to be vulnerable, and you're able to be intimate, and you're able to play, and you're able to be mischievous, and you're able to be serious, because it is in full alignment with who you are. And so one of the things I would invite you to do is next time you are speaking, notice how you feel. And then notice when you go down to the pub, or you go out to a bar and a restaurant and you're sat with your closest friends or you're sat with a loved one, and notice how you are talking with them. Notice how a topic comes up and you are engaging with them and you're playing with them and you are laughing with them, or you're getting really passionate and you're standing on your soapbox wanting to change the world. And then compare that to how you were on stage. If they are the same, self-high five. But if they are not, honor yourself, stretch yourself and say, okay, how can I be a better speaker? So, and it's all about growth, and we all get stretched as speakers. So very recently, in fact, it was June or July, Monique and I, we were in York, and we were attending the Network for Transformation Leaders, and we were all asked to do a presentation, and one of the presentations was this 7-minute long thing, is all I'm ever going to call it. For me, it was one of the biggest stretches, and I hated the whole 7 minutes. I didn't get my message across. There were elements where I was congruent, elements where I was incongruent. I got totally caught up in my head in terms of the process. Massive learning for me. The master was Monique. And so I am going to learn from Monique on how to do that. Because it's all, I'm very skilled at being able to stand in front of a room for 2-3 days, for a day, for an hour, doing a keynote. But actually having 7 minutes completely stretched me way outside of my comfort zone. I thought, I've got this nailed. It's all about me, not about my audience. Completely lost track of my message. And so we all get stretched. So I'm looking at what happened to myself in my mind, in my body, in my spirit to move me from one to the other. I didn't get permissions to be who I am. There was a massive gap. I got caught up in timings. I had too many slides. I hadn't rehearsed. All these different small minor things that you would learn from Monique and other speakers. Things that I do all the time. But I thought 7 minutes, hey, I can talk for 7 minutes, no problem. So, I've learned massive lessons for myself then, how to be congruent all the time as a speaker. So how can you identify when you are incongruent or when you are moving out of alignment with yourself? And I'll share a few things that have come for me in terms of studying my master's in credibility analysis and deception, things that I've experienced myself on stage. Primarily, they all came out in that 7-minute presentation. The first one is heart rate. So before I go on stage, my baseline is I often get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. That's normal. But I notice now that when I am about to deliver something I'm uncomfortable with, or I'm about to go down an area which I haven't rehearsed or maintained or prepared properly for, my heart rate goes up. The second thing that happens is I start to sweat. So my temperature starts to go up and my hands become clammy. My fingers start to get a bit sweaty. Good job I'm not shaking anybody's hand at that point. So, and I noticed that on my brow, I started to get a little bit hot. I'm glad I don't wear silk shirts, otherwise you've probably seen that I was perspiring in different ways. The other thing as well is whilst my temperature goes up around my hands, I start to have blanching in my face. And this is when I start to feel a bit lightheaded, a little bit sick. And that's because all the blood is moving from my head down to my legs. And this is the fight or flight. So all of a sudden, when we start to feel a bit sick or lightheaded and we want to run, that's literally everything that's moving from the brain, blood moving from the brain into the legs so that we can run. All sorts of things start to shut down. Or a fourth one would be your breathing. We start to breathe faster. You may find that you can't catch your breath on stage. And then the final one is around things around your digestion. We often become more thirsty. We have dry mouth. We start to reach out for water more. We start to lick our lips. All these kinds of things would be what we call within studies I'm doing a point of interest. But for you, it's a point of interest that you may be about to deliver something which is not truly congruent to who you are. Could be one of those, could be all of them. The biggest ones for me that often show up are I'm reaching out, a dry mouth, a dry tongue, I'm reaching for more water, and my heart rate goes up and there's a little bit of sweating. Once I have 2 or 3 of those, I'm thinking, okay, I'm about to deliver something I'm very uncomfortable about. What I do in that moment is I will pause, I will breathe, and I tell my audience. Because I want to be honest, I want to be open, I want to be congruent, say, you know what, actually I'm a little bit nervous about what I'm about to share with you. Remember we talked about me having permission for my style? You know, I would like permission just to share this information with you. I may stumble and fumble because it's something new, and I would welcome your feedback at the end to know how it came across. You know, and guess what? I always get great feedback. I always get some tweaks and changes. I always get the improvements that I'm looking for. And also the message goes across. And interestingly, is very useful for when you're selling from the stage because you've demonstrated vulnerability and intimacy with your audience. And you actually create more of a deeper connection and more love between you and your audience. And a great friend of mine and a great friend of Monique's, I don't know if she's been on the Hall of Fame yet, is a lady called Harriet Whaley-Cohen. And when Harriet speaks, you can see her on YouTube. When she speaks, she will always get permission to sell up front. And she would say to you right at the end, she said, tell you right up front, at the end, there's going to be something I'm going to pitch to you. You can switch off at that point. I will tell you when it's coming, or you can be present. But for now, I want to just give you lots of value. And then she gives all the value, and she gets right to the end. She's so congruent, it's masterful. She gets right to the end. And then she said, okay, here comes the sale that I mentioned at the beginning. So you can switch off at this point, or you can pay attention, then ask questions. And she puts the audience at choice, and it's a very powerful technique that I've seen. So just give you some variety of people who I trust, who I've seen who are incredibly congruent from the stage. She would be absolutely one of them. And so my final point that I want to just briefly talk about is the 5 pillars of congruency. And this is a whole new body of work that I am developing and will be coming out in my new book, The Congruent Self, in the new year. And it's Congruent Self, a journey from self-deception into consciousness. And this is about how we can become more conscious of who we are. And I'll link it into speaking. So in essence, to be congruent is to be the highest version of yourself, however you see that in the beginning, and what standards that you hold for yourself. So that's the overarching umbrella, but underneath that there are 5 pillars, and the first pillar is authenticity. And authenticity is about you being true to who you are and you being real. And so there is an animal spirit called the Black Panther. And the Black Panther is all about being able to live without masks. And so think about what masks do you have when you go on stage, because if you're pretending to be someone who you're not, then you're not being real, and you're not being true to who you are, and you're not authentic. And if this pillar is not there, then you can't be congruent. And there can be a real version of yourself in terms of where you are right now, and that will gradually evolve and will actually give you stories to share from the stage in terms of how you evolve and how you've grown. And if you think about who you are today compared to who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you are not the same. You've evolved. You have brought more light into your life. And so you are, when people say we're shine a brighter light as light workers, and we're all light workers, coaches, mentors, speakers, consultants, we're helping people to live better lives, bringing more light. Scientifically, what happens is we switch on more protons in our energy field. So what authenticity does when you're true to who you are, you shine like a bright light. The second one is integrity. This is about maintaining the wholeness of who you are, of your message, maintaining the uniqueness of the root cause of why you started what it is you're doing. So everybody on this call will have a specific message, and it is about maintaining the integrity of that message. And when you have the integrity of that message, and you are combining that with you being real and being true, all of a sudden, you will have a different connection with your audience. The third pillar is called coherence. We are all energy. Whether you believe that or not, we are all energy. I can give you all the quantum physics behind all of that if you wish to know it. There was a quantum physicist called Niels Bohr, and Niels Bohr in the 1920s did some research around energy. And he had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are 99.99999999999% energy. And the rest of it is physical matter. So less than 1% of what you see in the mirror is actually matter. Everything else is energy. And so the more we take care of our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, we maintain the coherence, the frequency of who we are. And that's what people feel when you stand on stage. They feel your energy. They feel how coherent you are. They feel how much love flows from your heart. Is your heart aligned with your mind? And there's a whole body of research from the HeartMath Institute, which is all about coherence. The fourth pillar is called fidelity. And this is about you being unshakable around your own personal values and your own ideals. And this is very different to you having integrity to your message. This is about if you took your world and you shook it upside down and you shook it up and you threw it against the wall, your values and your ideals in terms of who you are, what you stand for, the way you live your life would still be intact. And it's, and you can begin very, very simply, and a lot of people on this call are coaches, but just doing a values elicitation exercise. But my question for you, are your values that you've identified values that come from your mind, or are they values that come from your soul? And if you want to know more about how to do a soul values elicitation, contact me separately, and I will send you an exercise which you can do. And then the final pillar is truth. In the middle of the word truth is a word called rut, R-U-T. And a rut is a problem, a challenge, where there's pain or anything like that in your life. If you have a rut in your life, it means you're not honoring your truth. So if you take the word rut, R-U-T, put a T in front of H at the end, you get truth. And where there are problems in your life, you're not honoring your truth. And this is something which you can share with your audience. But for you, in terms of your own coherence, it's about honoring your ruts, experiencing them. You will never experience the problems and challenges that you're experiencing right now ever again. There are stories, there are messages within them. Honor them. Within shamanism, I read the runes, and there is a rune called Thurizaz, Thurisaz. And Thurizaz is the gateway to purpose. And if you wish to understand your true soul purpose in life, then you look at your ruts, your challenges, your hardships, and how you overcame them. And it's the how you overcame them that should form part of the stories that you share from the stage. And then you share them with honorable, coherent, aligned behaviors and words, and you just speak your truth no matter what. If someone doesn't like what you say or do, that's their problem, that's not yours. And when you make decisions or you speak your truth from the highest good of who you are, as a natural byproduct, you are absolutely honoring the highest good of everybody else that's around you. It's when you compromise yourself or you abuse yourself or you betray yourself, that's when you're ultimately compromising, abusing, and betraying your audience. And you deserve better, and so do they. So quick recap, congruence. To be truly congruent, you need to be authentic, you need to have integrity, you need to be coherent with your energy, you need to have fidelity with your ideals and your values, and you ultimately need to be able to speak your truth. So that's a whirlwind tour of many, 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 many different aspects of what I teach. I trust that you have found it valuable and useful. And so I am open to answer any questions that you may have for the last 15 minutes.
Perfect. Oh my God, I love it. I sometimes feel like, even though I always create these calls for our community, I always feel like, oh my God, I'm gaining so much for that myself. Thank you, Clayton. You did it again. Okay. Oh my God, I took so many notes, and I'm running a 3-day event in Paris, and some of you here with me today will be either on our event tomorrow night or at our live event in Paris. So I take some of the things you said to heart.
Thank you. May I just answer a question I just saw come up?
But there are a few questions. So let me address the question. So the first question that came up from Olivia was like, for example, you spoke about how you celebrate, right? The question is, how do you celebrate?
Yes.
Let's start with that one.
Okay, I celebrate in many different ways. So I will celebrate with my girlfriend. And so we'll go out to dinner. And we'll just have a really, really nice meal. I celebrate with my daughter. We both love roller coasters, so we maybe go to Alton Towers, or we'll go to another theme park, which we love to do, or I have some me time, or simply I just give myself a pat on the back and said, that was absolutely fantastic. So I will honor myself in some way, just to reinforce myself. And the reason I celebrate is because as I was growing up, one of my old programs and conditions was I never used to celebrate. And I remember when my book came out and my book won awards, and Isabel would say to me, Daddy, you just got these 6 awards for your book, but you're not celebrating. What's going on? And so when I explored that, I realized that part of my upbringing, when I passed my accountancy exams, it was the passing of the exams that was the celebration, which was flat versus actually, you know what, I've worked my backside off for 3 years to achieve something extraordinary. I need to celebrate that. So I started to introduce mini celebrations. It could even be a little ice cream or a cake or something like that. Everyone's different. Great question.
Great, fabulous. Here was another one from Olivia saying, what would you say to clients that say about themselves, I'm not really an extrovert, I'm not a bundle of fun and play, I'm relatively earnest person, serious, factual, and a listener. The stage is not my normal or chosen place to be. What would you say to them?
So is this as they are a speaker? Okay, so if they are this.
That is something.
So my girlfriend is an Aspie. She has Asperger's, and you've literally just described her. And so she gets permission to, you know, her expertise is efficiency. Her expertise is structure, order, process. And so she gets permission to bring structure, order, process to the front of the room. She'll talk about being an introvert, and and she'll get permissions to be who she is. And that's not who I am, but I have worked with people who have been introverts. And just because you're an introvert doesn't mean that you can't be a star of the stage. Because there are some amazing skills that introverts have around creating impactful silences. So one of the things I've seen many great speakers do who I know who are introverts is they've shared a story that has so much power and impact, and then they just put a pause in. And that pause is, in itself has created an impact, a shift, a transformation in some way for people. So, honor who you are. I know plenty of very powerful introverts who speak from the stage, but this is just their style.
Right, and I also heard about someone else that's more of a serious speaker, and he did exactly what you suggested to do, Clayton, telling the audience, be upright and say, hey, I might not be telling the greatest jokes, but I have incredible information to share with you that can have an impact on ... right? So you can say it in this way as well. And
just a little build upon that. One of the things that I discovered in my own life is think about what passion means. So if you think about Tony Robbins as a passionate speaker, he's high energy and, he engages with his audience. There are also very passionate people who know the minutiary detail of information. And so they would speak and share that detail, that information in a different way of being passionate. So it's about understanding you don't need to be rah, rah, rah as a passionate speaker. You can deliver very powerful information in a passionate way. I love what you said.
And I love that question is coming from you, Olivia, because you are a powerhouse on the stage. So interesting. Okay, Midun was asking, how do you keep your energy and stay congruent when you have some members in the corporate audience who might not always have positive intentions or have political intentions for the event that you don't support or share as a speaker? What do you say about that? Apart from
I called it out.
Events wisely where you speak in the first place, right? But there's more to say.
I call it out up front. It's for me, it's about contracting with your audience, about creating the space. So if you have a big audience of 500 people, that's different. But if you have an intimate audience of between 10 and 50, then it's really easy to get that information out, and you contract with your audience. Okay, so for example, one of the trainings that I'm doing right now is people have been told they have to be there. And so then people walk into the room, I don't want to be here, I've been told to be here, problem. And so I literally, as part of my opening, I will say to people, I know you've been told to be here, but you've been here you got to be here for the next 2 days. You got to be here for the next couple of hours. So you can either sit at the back and be miserable, that's fine. Or actually you can tell me what your problems are. So because I've got all this knowledge and wisdom and information, your colleagues have a lot of knowledge and wisdom and information. So perhaps we can help you to overcome them in the room. So let's have it. So there is a training and a speaking gig that I do called Psychology of Influencing. And people it's just about selling. People don't buy off the back of want and need, they buy off the back of the psychological profile. So I effectively do a lot of speaking and teaching around the psychology of influencing. Up front, I want to know what people's problems are. And that's part of their, why are they here? Tell me what your problem is. And then I use the content to solve the problem.
Great. Here's another question that I feel is a little bit related and still stands on its own, from Olivia again. It's she's saying that I find after transformational training where I've shared myself and soaked up everyone else's shedding of their ruts, I'm emotionally and physically drained. You know, I cry once I get home and curl up in my bears. How do you deal with this initial emptying before refilling your own self-cures? I think it's
okay, so the first
question as well. Yeah.
Okay, the first thing is I never use my energy, ever. So whenever I'm speaking or if I'm running a corporate event or a spiritual event, the way I take care of myself is I use all the energy that's around me from the divine. So I literally channel through all the energy that I need, so I am never depleted, ever. Even if I'm doing a 2, 3, 4 day event. I do make sure I take care of my physical well-being, so I drink plenty of water. My team makes sure I'm drinking the water. I only have healthy foods to take care of that. I never have coffee to spike my energy. I never have sugar to spike my energy when I'm speaking. I have those when I'm not speaking. But ultimately, so many speakers are drained because they're using their own physical energy as opposed to actually, and I can show you how to do it through meditation or just intention. I just open myself up and I just allow the divine energy to flow through me. Might be a little bit funky foo-foo-wah-wah, but I know in this audience, I think you're up for it. I can show you separately how to do that. I can do a little mini YouTube thing for that and send it out to people for that money.
Well, maybe you can do something like that for our community and we can post it in our community. I think
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Yeah, we can do that.
Would be great. Okay, so another question from Tanya. She had dreams about butterfly and a tiger. And I know she thinks about running an event around that and calling it like that. So what does a butterfly and tiger mean as a spiritual animal?
Okay, so butterflies, there's many different meanings of butterflies, but one of the main messages for butterflies is about completed transformation. So you link that in with the tiger is all about new adventures that are coming. So if you have completed transformation through the butterfly, then you are now preparing yourself for the new adventures that are coming to you. And there's typically, between the butterfly and the tiger, about 4 to 6 weeks before the new adventures begin. So get prepared, Tanya. There's some great adventures coming your way. And one of the things that you can also do, Tanya, is you can meditate with the butterfly, but primarily the tiger for you. And the way that you do that, put on some beautiful meditation music in the background. You focus on your breathing. As you breathe, see and sense your heart open and invite the consciousness of the tiger into you. And as you invite the tiger into you, you become the tiger becomes you. And then you say, take me where I need to go. Show me what I need to understand about my new adventures. And then the tiger will take you. It'll be 5 minutes or an hour. Doesn't matter. You will have fun with that.
Thank you.
Great. Another question from Tanya. If you keep a speech for 45 minutes, is that too long? Because in TED, it's only 18 minutes. Can people concentrate more than 18 minutes? Yeah, I mean, now that comes into speech crafting and how do you grab and keep the attention of an audience? But maybe you can say a few things about that, Clayton.
I can briefly touch that. So when I prepare any form of presentation, what I'm noticing, what I do is how do I want my audience to feel at each point? An audience will never remember what you say, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And so when I am crafting my opening, and so what I'm doing with that is I'm saying, okay, each stage of my open, how do I want my audience to feel? And then how am I, as the speaker, going to do that? And then my chunks in the body, I'm saying, okay, how do I want my audience to feel at each chunk, and how am I going to do that? And then in my close, what's my biggest thing I want my audience to take away, and how am I going to do that? And so it's all about feeling and how I'm going to action that within my audience. And so TED Talks is masterful. There's some great books which they have where they teach you how to do that.
Beautiful. So Herlinda is asking, when you remember your start of your journey, we all remember that, right? Any advice for people that start on congruency? Maybe just give again a couple of hints and tips of what first to do to become more congruent.
So to be more congruent, the first place I would start is noticing where your pain is. Notice where your problems are, notice where your challenges are, notice where your hardships are. Too many people ignore them. We've been conditioned to ignore them. And so just notice where they are and say, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to be. How do I move from A to B? You may need to make some very courageous decisions around that. But in the beginning, just notice where your pain is, because that's where the incongruency will be, or the inconsistency will be. And I there's still areas of my life where I'm working right now. I was talking to Monique before. The biggest thing I'm looking at right now is congruent health for myself. So I'm looking at where my mental mindset is around health. I'm looking at what I put in my body around health. I'm looking at my energy. I'm looking at, how do I feel when I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning? Am I jumping out of bed? Or am I going back to bed? What time am I going to bed at night? So I'm looking at my consistencies and my inconsistencies and my pain, and how that's then reflecting within my body. And when my weight goes up, there's something not right, and then I will speak to friends. So like Guido Szymanski, who's been in the Hall of Fame, very close friend of mine, specializes a lot in health. So I will sit and I'll talk to Guido if we got a call on Sunday, because I need some help about this.
Fabulous. Great. Thank you. It looks like that was the last question. I think we've answered it all. I don't know if there's any more, but if so, Clayton, you're part of our community. You're part of our mySpeakerBusiness tribe. And if more are coming up in the next couple of days, you can always post something, everyone, for Clayton. And it's been amazing to have you. Thank you for being so congruent and on your own. And I think it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. We become more and more congruent in every area of our life. And when we feel we have one tackled, there's another one showing up, or we are thrown back into another one when we thought we are congruent already, right? So
there is a great book which I would recommend to people, and it's called Leadership in Self-Deception. And it's a book that I'm reading right now as part of my MSc. And it's very, very masterfully written to be able to help you to understand how we betray ourselves day to day. And so I would recommend that for everybody certainly as a base point for yourself to recognize when you are deceiving yourself. And it will help you on the stage as well.
But I think the moment we become more congruent, I think, it has so many positive, it triggers so much positive. First of all, the discussion that and the question that Olivia asked as well is, I feel that when we are really congruent with ourselves and we know who we are, and we know we're not trying, we're not putting effort into being someone else. So again, we are actually, not depleting our energy so much anymore. And also, I feel that we also connect with the people that we are meant to connect with. And we're touching the people we are meant to touch. And the people that we are meant to share our message with will hear it with our words in that place, in that time. And I feel that that's not only true as a speaker, it's true with everything we do and everything we are, any moment of our life. And
I would agree completely with every word. For myself, I realized that whenever I was pretending to be who I'm not, it was exhausting. It was exhausting because what's happening from a cognitive perspective, we're actually lying to ourselves, and we have to think about the lie that we're actually about to tell. And then we have emotional impact upon that as well, because we have different feelings about how the lie that we're about to tell, and then that creates leakages of the truth anyway. And so your audience knows that you're actually not being honest.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree. Just be who you are. If someone doesn't like that, that's their stuff. That's not yours.
Mm. Beautiful. I love it. Okay, so let's all join on the journey to become more congruent with who we are and what we do. And, you know, that way we make a bigger difference all together. And Clayton, it's been wonderful. Thank you for taking the time. I know we see that you're in a car. You're always on the go. I know that. Okay. But thank you for stopping and sharing your wisdom with us. I know that you're a busy man. Thank you for being here for our community. And I learned a lot.
Me.
And thank you all for coming on and, you know, sharing your questions, you know, being with us. And I hope it really uplifts you to another level again of being you, being an incredibly powerful, impactful speaker, entrepreneur, and change maker. So all have a fabulous time, and I'll have you again in November. And in the meantime, we'll stay in touch on the community. So exchange and share. And quite a few of us going to meet in London at the beginning of November, sharing the stage there. So I really look forward to that. And Clayton, you have a fabulous time. Congruency is my word of the day, of the week, of my life. Okay. So all the best to you, and have a safe trip.
Thank you.
And thanks for being with us. Cheers.
Loved it. Bye.